Hey guys, insight number 2. So we covered off how to study Isaiah in the first one, which I have done before, but a little refresher course. Let's bring it to our minds again. Right now we're going to look at chapters 11 and 12. So 11, as I already said, starts off talking about Nephi takes back the I'd say the pen and the paper, but we're talking about the chisel and the metal plate, and says that, like Jacob spoke many more things other than what we have just studied, but that suffices to say that that's enough, and that he knows that Jacob spoke the truth and it's great, but he's going to write words of Isaiah because it's really important for us. And then he goes on to say, and he says this several times as he's writing here, it becomes this whole thing, but I love this phrase, I really do. My soul delighteth, because in today's world, my soul do not delighteth in that many things, but it does still delight, and very similar to what Nephi expresses. So while all this sadness and heavy ensues, my soul does delight in the things of Christ and the things of the gospel, the covenants I have, which give me hope. My soul does delight in those things, and I hold fast to them. So in verse 4 he says, my soul delighteth in proving unto my people the truth of the coming of Christ. Talks about the law of Moses and how that's going to come about, and that Christ is going to give it even better. It's just going to be awesome. 5, and my soul delighteth in the covenants of the Lord, which he hath made to our fathers. So although we suspect Nephi took covenants of his own, he's talking about the covenants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the ones taken by his forefathers that Lehi would have embraced as well and brought into their family, that perhaps even Lehi's parents, who we don't know about, but they would have had that same thing. I mean, it's that same family, so those covenants are meaningful, and those are the same covenants we have today that we call temple covenants. And I delight in those. I don't completely understand every little single thing about them, but I'm still joyful about them. And I haven't always been. It's taken some effort to get there, but my soul definitely delights in them. And in verse 6 you see, my soul delighteth in proving unto my people that save Christ should come, all men must perish. And that Jesus needs to come. So some of the things to look here, if you're looking for Jesus, teach Christ. So in verse 4 he shows up. In verse 5 you see his promises. Verse 5 is lovely. So let's read that one. It says, and also my soul delighteth in the covenants of the Lord, which he hath made to our fathers. Yea, my soul delighteth in his grace, and his justice, and power, and mercy, and the great and eternal plan of deliverance from death. Now, I definitely delight in that. So I'm likening it unto me. I believe that too, and I know that to be true. So there you go. Studying, not too hard. Verse 6 gives us purpose, that, convince them to come unto Christ. Now, so that's there. So he writes 3 things that his soul delights in, but he says this again throughout the chapter, so you will see this again. But does your soul delight in things? And what can you do more to delight in these things? So I thought of that years ago when I'm like, I don't necessarily delight in the covenants of the temple. I know they're necessary, but I need to know more about them to specifically say I could delight in them. It's not something, it was a way of living that didn't come too natural. It felt really foreign, but now I know why. I know why it felt foreign, but I'm used to that now, and living without them would feel foreign. So it's something different in there, but I had to do more so that I could delight in them. Speaking of which was learning more about the temple, and that's what goes into chapter 12. You get temple talk. Now anytime you hear about the mountains of the Lord and the house of the Lord, it's temple talk. So in verse 2 he says, and it shall come to pass in last days when the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains. The house of the Lord should be established in the top of the mountains. That's temple talk. It's talking about temples. Don't necessarily have to be on a mountain. I know the Hamilton, New Zealand one's on a hill, isn't a very slight mound of a hill. And you could say that temples in Salt Lake are definitely in the mountains, but not all temples have to be in the mountains. The one in Hong Kong, for example, not necessarily in a mountain, but it is on several floors up, because that's all the space they had. So it's talking metaphorically as well as literally. Remember that when Jesus wanted to get closer to God, he went up to the mountains. It's a place for peace and quiet. So it's talking about a place of peace and quiet. But it goes on to talk about how, like verse 3, let's just read that. And many people shall go and say, come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. And he will teach us of his ways, and we shall walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And then over in 5, O house of Jacob, come ye and let us walk in the light of the Lord. Now remember, Jacob becomes Israel. So that's all of us. The house of Jacob, that's us. All of us. Even if we might be a branch of or adopted into, it's still us. So yeah, it was just really good. At the end of verse 6 there, like you go to the mountain of the Lord to focus on things of Christ, to focus on the teachings of the prophets. You go and have those meditative moments. But in 6 it says, therefore, O Lord, thou hast forsaken thy people, the house of Jacob, because they be replenished from the east. So they go astray, basically, and bring things in that are new and exciting, but not necessarily gospel and not of the Lord, which goes on to say, and hearken unto soothsayers like the Philistines, and they please themselves in the children of strangers. And I'm like, oh, that does not sound good, right? It sounds a little pedophilia there going on, but maybe it's not exactly what he means, but it's still like hearken unto soothsayers. And if you look at the footnote for that, 6a, it says sorcery. So that gives you that. So, see in chapter 12 we see temple talk, and like the question in the Come Follow Me manual talks about, why is a mountain or a house of God good symbols? No, so why is a mountain or a house good symbols for a temple? What do you think that is? Because they're peaceful places? Well, there can be peaceful places. If you've ever been to the mountains on a good day, great. If your house is in a good space, it's fantastic. It's a good place to be, to meditate, to think, to rest. So those are reasons I think they're good symbols for the temple, but what do you think? Let us know in the comments. And why do we need temples? I know why we need them. I know why I believe we need them. And I'm grateful that we have them. What do you think? Why do we need temples? I don't know. I'm not going to give you my answer. I want to know. Let us know. Why do you think we need? And how does this description in verse 3 make you feel about temples? So verse 3 where it talks about, which we read out, going to the mountain and teach us his ways and walk in his paths. Does that kind of answer the question? But anyway, how does that make you feel about temples? Does that give you the reason why we need them? Have a think about that. And just note in verse 6, the who do you choose to listen to, and what difference does this make? Are you listening to sorcerers, soothsayers, or are you listening to the prophet? It's a big difference. And what's a modern day sorcerer or soothsayer? What does that look like to you? Is that like a false prophet? Could you identify those? What might they be speaking about? What do you think? Can you think of any? It's an interesting concept, and it will be different in every country and every little sphere. I certainly know of some in New Zealand, but I'm not going to name them because it's defamation. But I would definitely call them soothsayers. They really do speak out of a hole in their take Christ's words and twist them to suit their own means. Definitely soothsayers and sorcerers. So there you go. Rich by unlawful means. But there you have it. That's what I'm thinking of. What do you think though? Let us know. So, what does your soul delight in? How does that lead into temple talk? And can you delight in these things? Can you see these things? And do you see the reason for temples? If not, go back and read verse 3 again. Alright, hang around. We're going over to 13 and 14. This is good for this day. I'll see you there.